Welcome students. Hope you are good. Today we are going to take up steps of controlling process. Let us understand that the first step is to set the performance standards. Once you have done that, you will measure your actual performance, then will compare the actual performance with standard, then you will analyze any deviation, and then finally you take corrective actions. Now let us understand each of the steps in detail. The first step is setting up the performance standards. See, in this particular step, what we do is we set the standards. Now, what is standards? These are criteria against which the performance would be measured. For example, if you remember, we studied about time motion, where we said that every worker will produce, let's say, 10 units in a day. That is standard, which I have set at for every worker on it's to produce 10 units in a day. So standard is nothing but the criteria against which the performance would be measured. It serves as a benchmark. Now I have the benchmark that 10 units need to be produced by workers. So now when I am measuring the performance of every worker, I would say if he has produced 10 units or not in a day. Remember, it can be set in both quantitative as well as qualitative terms. Now, I gave you the quantitative example. In terms of qualitative, it would be improving the goodwill, improving the quality standards against which the performance measurement would be done. When you are setting the standards, they should be flexible enough to be modified whenever required. If you didn't do this, that they are very rigid and we cannot change, because then it will defeat the process of controlling. Let's understand the standards which are used in functional areas. When it comes to production, obviously the first thing that comes in mind is quantity. How would I measure it? It would be measured with the quantity produced. Then comes your quality of goods which are being produced. The cost, individual job, and performance of these are few standards which are used in measuring the performance in production unit. Now, when it comes to marketing, the amount of sales volume which has been achieved, or what is the sales expense, there is a decrease in sale expense. Obviously, the organization is bound to make a profit. Advertisement expenditure, then individual, how the performance person is performing, is he doing job which was been given to him or not, is achieving the target is given to him or not, then the salesperson's performance, and so on. Let's move for the measurement of actual performance. This is step number 2. Now, what exactly is this? Here we do if the performance is measured in a objective and reliable manner. So first thing is, once we are set with the standards, we measure the actual performance against those standards. Remember, the techniques which are being used when measuring the actual performance would be personal observation. That is, the manager see how many hours employee waste by going here and there or taking longer breaks. All this would be done through personal observation of manager. There would be sample checking of goods which are being produced by the employee, or there could be performance report, that is how many times is the target of presenting a report to the management, or how many times he has not performed as per the requirement of this is measured. Now remember, preferably the measurement of work should be done during the performance. What we do, if we measure the performance only after the work is done, but then it defeats the function of control in, because a corrective action would be taken after a very long time, and it is always advisable the moment the work starts, you should be at regular interval keep measuring the actual performance, so that timely corrective actions are taken by the management. In terms of individual, what happens, how do we measure the actual performance? Generally, it is the superior would see how the performance has been of that particular individual. So there would be a performance report which would be presented by the manager to the management to see how the actual performance has been when it comes to the company. If I have to see how the actual performance of companies on overall basis, I will see how the ratios, and we would have these financial ratios which help us to understand the performance of company. So any management can take these ratios from account department, can take the numbers, that can take the figures from account department, do the calculation of ratios, and understand how the actual performance of company has been. This helps in taking the corrective actions in timely basis, so the organizational goals that is to be achieved in 1 year is achieved. The next the next step would be to take to compare the actual performance with standard. What do we do in that? We compare the actual performance of employees or of the organization, and then we compare with the standard. And then if there is any deviation between the actual and the desired result, that can be found out because of this comparison. Now remember, the comparison will become easier when the standards are set in quantitative terms, because it is very difficult to measure employees' morale. But then, if I have to say that the employees' turnover got reduced by 5%, then I am giving a quantitative terms, and that would be very easy for me to measure. So, hence, remember, when you are comparing the actual performance with standard, we need to ensure that the standards are set in quantitative terms. The next step would be analyzing deviation. What do we do here? See, it is very important to determine the acceptable range of deviation. Now, what is the acceptable range of deviation means? Let's continue with the previous example, that if the worker is producing 10 units every day, and so the acceptable range of deviation should be 2%. That means if a worker is working for 20 days, so he should produce 200 units in that 20 days. But if the worker is producing 196 units, so it is in the acceptable range. Let's take another example of salary cost. If we have an acceptable range of increase in salary cost should not be beyond 5%. If it increase the cost by beyond 5%, what do? We take the corrective actions. For example, uh, if the cause of deviation, for example, the defective material, so the corrective actions would be change the quality specification. And if I am producing a pen and the consumers are complaining, or if I found that pens are frequently breaking down, that means the plastic that is being used is not of good enough quality. When you're manufacturing the pen, so you can change the quality specification of raw material which you have used, or defective machinery. What would be the corrective actions? You need to repair the existing machine or replace the machine if it cannot be repaired. Similarly, if you see an absolute machine, then you need to go to technological upgradation of that particular machine. If you see a defective process, then you need to modify the existing process. Similarly, if there are defective physical conditions of work, when you need then you need to produce the improve the physical condition of the work. So these are the few examples where the corrective actions can be taken. So first you have to see how what exactly is the cause of deviation, understand how it can be rectified, and then take the corrective actions accordingly. I hope you are clear with the topic, students. Goodbye till next time.